To welcome everyone to our September 3 and 30. And my name is Lou Lanyu. I am the Education Programs Manager, and I'm delighted to introduce you to this month's speaker. And it is Dr. Theresa Cunningham. She's the museum's assistant curator of European art and Mellon Collections. And she presented this talk in person on Tuesday to a very nice crowd. It was a wonderful talk, and she's going to be giving it today in the virtual format. And it is entitled Portraits of Three Generations of the Walpole Family Reunited at VMFA. And before I turn it over to Theresa, for everyone here, after Teresa's through, she's happy to take any questions that you have. If you do have them, feel free to put them in the Q&A box that's in Zoom. So I am going to turn it over to you now, Teresa.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. VMFA is lucky to have portraits of three generations of the Walpole family, a significant British political and aristocratic dynasty. Funnily enough, these paintings all entered the collection at different times. They're actually in different curatorial departments, but they happen to all be on view right now. And so I thought this was a good opportunity to discuss them and the family and learn a little bit more about this some of the unique characters in this group. So the first painting that we're going to be looking at is this portrait of Sir Edward Walpole by William Hogarth. Edward Walpole was the son of Robert Walpole. Sorry, Edward Walpole was the son of Robert Walpole, the first Prime Minister of Great Britain. He's the fourth of Robert's 5 children, and he's the older brother of Horace Walpole, noted 18th century British socialite, and the person who commissioned the grand country house Strawberry Hill. Edward took a grand tour to Italy in 1730, and he began collecting works of art, including, when he got back to Britain, works by Hogarth. And he was kind of a quiet patron of the arts throughout his lifetime. He also supported musicians. He was kind of an amateur artist and poet himself. He was a very reluctant participator in British politics, unlike his father. However, he kind of got pushed into that by his family. He became a member of Parliament and ultimately Chief Secretary to the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. Later, he took a position within the Department of the Exchequer, which is the British equivalent to our Department of Treasury. In his personal life, he maintained a long-term relationship with Dorothy Clement, who was a milliner's assistant. A milliner is a hat maker. But because of their dramatic differences in social class, they were unable to get married. However, they did raise 4 children together: Laura, Maria, who we're going to talk about later, Edward, and Charlotte. And he raised his children with the last name Walpole, which was very unusual at the time for children born out of wedlock. He loved them, and his brother Horace, who had no children of his own, particularly doted on them. And both Edward and his brother ensured that the children had a robust education, even his daughters, and also that they were introduced to other children of noblemen and aristocrats, as they would have been had their parents been married. This portrait by Hogarth is a very informal, intimate portrait of Edward. We do not see him with the kind of accoutrements like his insignia of the Order of the Bath that are in other more formal portraits of Edward. It was intended to be given by Edward to his good friend, Lord Boyne. However, Lord Boyne passed away before the portrait could be completed, and so it remained in Hogarth's studio until Hogarth passed away. Pardon me. After Hogarth's death, the contents of his workshop were taken over by Samuel Ireland, who found the portrait of Edward Walpole and decided to give it to Horace Walpole. And so the portrait was brought to Strawberry Hill. At the time that it arrived at Strawberry Hill, the 2 brothers were not on the best of terms. So Horace opted not to display the portrait. And when Edward died shortly after that, Horace decided to give it to his niece, Laura, Edward's oldest child, and by some accounts, she was his favorite daughter. The portrait remained in Laura's family until the 20th century. when it entered the art market. And it passed through a couple of different private dealers and different owners until it was acquired by Mrs. A.D. Williams, who donated it to VMFA in 1949. And she was one of VMFA's earliest patrons. If you walk through our galleries, you'll see her name on many labels, not just works that she acquired and gave to the museum, but also things that the museum purchased through the Williams Fund, which was one of our earliest funds for acquisitions. Hogarth was not trained as a painter. He trained as a silver engraver and first made a foray into printmaking. He made satirical prints that poked fun at the lower aristocracy and their kind of social activities. He did turn to portraiture at some point in his life. It was a lucrative business, and he and his workshop kind of established a format. And so you see a lot of similarities between Hogarth's portraits. However, despite this, he's also, very keen to display the kind of naturalistic tendencies of his sitters. We see Edward as a real person. You can tell that he sat for this portrait several times. We can see kind of like this subtle hint of a smile on his face and kind of softness around his eyes. It's a very humanizing depiction. Many people were kind of nervous to have their portrait painted by Hogarth because they were worried. They thought of his satirical prints and some of the paintings based on those prints, and they didn't want to be made fun of in their portraits. Edward Walpole and Hogarth had a good relationship. Walpole collected works by Hogarth, and so he didn't seem to be worried about that. However, Edward was kind of, as I mentioned earlier, an amateur artist. He dabbled in painting. And many people think that the Hogarth print on the screen here, the satire of false perspective, which kind of makes fun at these gentlemen painters with no artistic training who aren't able to understand the fundamentals of perspective and kinds of things that you would learn early on in art school, believe that Hogarth was making this print based on seeing paintings by Edward Walpole. So although he didn't poke fun at him in his portrait, he did poke fun at him in the print. Hogarth's portraits, the vast majority of them date between 1740 and 1750. Our painting is dated 1745 to 1750, so right in this kind of prime era of portrait production for Hogarth's studio. And as I said, it's a very informal portrait. We don't see a lot of symbolism and iconography, as we'll see in the two other portraits that we're going to look at today. And that's in part because it was meant as a gift between two friends, two people who knew each other very well, who didn't need kind of all of these extra accoutrements to understand the wider meaning of the portrait. They just wanted a faithful and sympathetic likeness of a close friend. As I mentioned before, Walpole had 4 children. His second daughter, Maria, although his favorite daughter was Laura, Maria was the favorite niece of her uncle, Horace Walpole. And so he ensured that she received a robust education, a much stronger education than most young women at the time. And he also worked very hard to introduce her to his friends in British society and ensure that she had a strong network. He facilitated her marriage to her first husband, James, Earl of Waldegrave. This was a very politically advantageous match for both of them. For James, it meant that he was able to align himself with the politically powerful Walpole family. Maria's grandfather, Robert, was the first prime minister. Her father was a member of parliament and also involved in politics. And for Maria, she received a noble title. She became the Countess of Waldegrave. And so it helped to kind of rehabilitate her image. And many people forgot that her parents had never been married. Even though this was very much a strategic marriage, it does seem like the two of them loved one another. They had 3 daughters together, and by all accounts, they were very happy until 1763, when her husband died of smallpox. This left Maria in a very precarious financial situation, but once again, her uncle came to her rescue, and this time, in 1765, he introduced her to Prince William Henry, the Duke of Gloucester and Edinburgh, and the younger brother to King George III. The two of them hit it off, and they secretly married in 1766. Even though Maria's first marriage had done a lot to kind of rehabilitate her image and reputation, I think the prospect of the brother of the king marrying an illegitimate person was maybe a bridge too far. And so they opted not to tell the king about their marriage, which was a serious breach of royal protocol. However, they kind of lived together. Their relationship was and marriage was more or less an open secret. It was the subject of a lot of rumors and speculation, but for all accounts, the royal household kind of turned a blind eye to it. However, in 1772, Maria and Prince William Henry had to inform the king of their marriage because she became pregnant, and they wanted to ensure that everyone knew that they had been married before the birth of their child. The king did not react well. He barred both of them from court. He stripped the Duke, his brother, from his royal appointments and also from his military rank. And he refused to increase their annual allowance after their daughter Sophia, was born, even though this would have been customary at the time. Once again, this led to Maria finding herself in a precarious situation. And so she and her husband decided to travel to Italy, where things were a bit cheaper. And they stayed there during this period of ostracization, but they ended up returning to London in 1777. They had 2 children while they were in Italy, but in 1777, their youngest child, their daughter Caroline, dies of smallpox, so they returned to the UK. The portrait that we're looking at here was made about 1776 to 1779, during this period after they are married, but while their relationship is more or less a secret. And it is set in the interior of their London townhouse. The artist is Nathaniel Dance Holland. He was the son of an architect, and you can kind of see his interest in architectural features and interiors in this painting. Although, intriguingly enough, the vast majority of his portraits depict sitters outside in the landscape outside of their country homes. And although this interior scene is a little unusual for Dance Holland, it's very appropriate for the subject matter. Maria, this kind of a secret lifestyle that she is living with her kind of unpublicized marriage. And so it is much more appropriate that she be depicted in an interior scene. We see this kind of vibrant coloring of the green wallpaper and the luscious textiles on the carpet. Dance Holland has depicted her looking up from her reading. This is a reference to her strong education that she received thanks to Horace Walpole. She has a lot of luxury goods surrounding her. We can see the gleam of this mahogany table and a series of pieces of porcelain lined up over the marble mantelpiece. She's crossed her legs, which kind of, one, gives her a sense of presence. She takes up more space, but also creates these folds of drapery that allow Dance Holland to kind of show off his own technical skill. She's in this very kind of lively white silk dress, allows him to show the play of light and shadow on this lustrous fabric. She also looks out with a very assertive gaze. So even though this is from a clandestine period of her life, she does not seem like secretive or ashamed. She's clearly like in command of this room, of this household. And she has a real sense of agency and autonomy that we don't often see in portraits of women at this time. This painting also remained in the family until it entered the art market in the mid-20th century. It was purchased by VMFA in 1960, and originally it was believed to be by a different British artist, Johann Zoffany, but a lot of extensive research by previous VMFA staff have helped determine that the sitter is actually Dance Holland. And I think it's a very important reminder that we're always continuing to learn new things about our collection and understand things more thoroughly. It's one of the exciting things about working here. After Maria and her husband returned to the UK in 1777, they, kind of struggled for a few more years until 1779, when the king had a bit of a change of heart. And you'll see also that that's the same date as this portrait by Benjamin West, which depicts Prince William and his elder sister, Princess Sophia, the 2 living children of Maria and the Duchess of Gloucester. Benjamin West was born in Pennsylvania, the son of a Quaker. He was one of the first Americans to study art in Europe, thanks to the support of Philadelphia-based patrons. He traveled to Italy in 1760. He spent 3 years in Italy, and then he arrives in London in 1763. And he rose to fame in 1770 for his painting The Death of General Wolfe, which quickly became a favorite of King George III. George III was so fond of him that that Benjamin West was able to retain his royal patronage even through the American Revolution. This is kind of a tumultuous time. the North American colonies are revolting, and even though West is an American, he kind of keeps a low political profile and is able to retain the king's favor throughout the war. He became one of the best-known painters in the entire British Empire, and he helped to establish the Royal Academy along with Joshua Reynolds, and ultimately would become president of the Royal Academy in 1792. And although he's kind of, not taking a big stance in support of America in order to maintain his royal patronage, he does train a generation of American artists studying in London, including Samuel Morse, Charles Wilson Peale, Gilbert Stuart, and Thomas Sully, among others. And you can see paintings by some of these folks on view in our American art galleries. But the painting that we're looking at here was commissioned by King George III in 1779. He commissioned a series of royal portraits, the first batch in 1776 and the second batch in 1779, depicting small groups of members of the royal family. This one he intended as a gift to his brother, the Duke of Gloucester, and it was meant as a sign of reconciliation. It coincided with the reinstatement of the allowances for the children specifically. And one of the reasons why the king had a change of heart in this regard was because it sort of occurred to him that the children were potential heirs to the throne, and so therefore they needed to be supported. However, before he gave the painting to his brother, he put it on view at the Royal Academy in 1779. And it's hard to tell on the screen here, but this painting is significantly larger in person than the other two that we looked at earlier. It was meant to be seen by large groups of people, and it's meant to make a bold political statement. It's not the quick, intimate portrait to be exchanged among friends that we saw at first when we were looking at the image of Edward Walpole, nor is it this interior scene that Maria's husband commissioned for inside their home of a kind of private period of their lives. It's a major royal commission, and it's rife with symbolism. If we look back here, we can see Westminster Abbey. This is the site where British monarchs where the coronation of British monarchs occurs. In the front, we see a bronze statue of a she-wolf nursing Remus and Romulus. The kind of origin story of the Roman Empire is that these two brothers, Remus and Romulus, are raised by the she-wolf and then grow up to found the city of Rome. The Prince William has his elbow kind of rested on the statue. This is a reference to the fact that he was born in Rome during the period of the family's ostracization when they were living in Italy. You can also see in his hand this little purse. That's meant to symbolize the allowances and the money that have been reinstated. He's holding hands with his older sister, Sophia, who is gesturing towards the lion. The lion has kind of dual meaning here. It symbolizes the city of Venice, which is another part of Italy where the family spent time during their travels, but it's also a symbol of the king. And so the two children kind of look and gesture deferentially towards the king. Under the lion, we see an ermine robe and a crown. These are also symbols of the king, and they also reference the Order of the Garter, this chivalric order that their father, the Duke of Gloucester, was meant to be a part of. We have connections here between contemporary history and ancient history, and the overall emphasis of the painting is the right relationship between a king and his subjects. And this operates here on both a personal and a larger political level. On a personal level, the hope here is that these two children will respect the king and follow royal protocol in a way that their parents did not. And on a larger political level, we have to think about this in the context of the American Revolution and understand that the king is also hoping that his North American colonies will respect his sovereignty and not continue their revolt. By the time that this painting was made, it's a tumultuous period in British political history. It's becoming more and more clear that they're going to lose the North American colonies. And so when this painting was displayed first at the Royal Academy, this symbolism would be so important because you would have a lot of visitors who would see it who maybe wouldn't recognize the faces of the children immediately, but would understand the larger symbolism and context that we see here displayed in the portrait. I should also note, because of the kind of tension in the relationship between King George and his brother at the time, the two children did not sit for Benjamin West. So we see much more generalized features on them. He was not having the same kind of close portrait sessions that Dance Holland was having with Maria or Hogarth was having with Edward. So we get more generalized features there. And so this painting stayed with the family again for a very long time until 2013, when it briefly entered the art market and then was acquired by VMFA in 2015. So it's over the course of several decades, these three portraits of different generations of the same family have arrived here in Virginia. As I said, Benjamin West was born in America, so this painting is in the American Art Department. And today they're all reunited here in Richmond, and you can see them on view if you visit the museum now. Thank you all for coming, and I'm very happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good
All right.
afternoon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.